What is Mike? Okay, the live stream team is set. Are we ready? Okay, as soon as she's come, we will start, because at least with the live stream, we can go global. Dear colleagues, once more, I want to thank you again for honoring this invitation. I want to thank the live stream team that has been working tirelessly to ensure that we have all the press conferences live stream. So we are sure that the world is following us live all the way from the headquarters of the Kigali Convention Center. It is my honor to have with us and to receive Her Excellency Commissioner Fatima Haram Acyl, who is in charge of trade and industry in the African Union. And she will be briefing you on the African Union's trade and industry agenda as a catalyst for Africa's development, amongst other important issues. I will first allow the Commissioner to quickly give you an introduction of some of the issues and achievements under her department, and later on we'll take some questions from you. Excellency, you have the floor.
Thank you. Let me just Is it fine? I can talk?
Yes, please.
Okay. Well, thank you very much, and good afternoon to all of you. It's a pleasure really to address you once again. But, you know, in order for me to talk about trade, industry, catalyst for development, I think we need to ask ourselves, what is the most important thing in this continent today? Of course, everybody will talk about peaceful continent. Of course, we will talk about food security, and we will talk about creation of employment. So creation of employment is the key. And trade and industry is a key department, is a key actually on creation of the job, because we deal with industrialization. And when you talk about industrialization, whether for adding value to your commodities such as agriculture, mining, oil and gas, and so forth, you're talking about productive capacity. You're talking about transforming the raw material in this continent. And when you talk about not really exporting raw material, when you talk about really transformation of the raw material on the continent, then you're talking about skill required, you're talking about the youth, you're talking about employment. So I think, again, in my view, trade and industry is very critical on anything to do with the development of this continent. Precisely, my department deals with trades. On the trade side, we deal with a continental agenda, which means, we need to increase our low level of intra-African trade. We all know that today it stands around 12%, and we must do something to improve it. What do we need to do to improve the intra-African trade? We must address the issue, again, of productive capacity. Actually, the prerequisites of trading is producing. You must produce in order for you to trade. If you don't have anything to trade, Therefore, you don't produce, you don't trade. So that's important. The second thing that is important, we need to have trade facilitation. Trade facilitation is important because when you talk about boosting intra-African trade, it's important that good for country A is really can enter to country B and so forth. And it's very, very key. Sometimes, country A may have surplus of something that country B require, even for, survival, and country B doesn't have it. So it's very, very important that we look at this issue. The issue of regional value chain is important again. The issue of movement of people is important. So when you need to address this boosting intra-African trade, you need to look at all of these causes that hinder, that handicap our boosting intra-African trade. The second agenda that we're working on the continental trade, as opposed to multilateral trade, which I will talk about it, trade with outsider, is really the continental free trade area. As you all know today, we are 54 small, fragmented market. Africa, so it's important that we talk about the issue of one Africa, one market, because all our economies are too small, too fragmented. Everybody knows that we need huge amount of investment for our infrastructure project. Everybody knows that we need to create employment, that we need to talk about, regional value chain, because the world today is talking about global value chain. Our young people are dying on the sea for a better tomorrow, the Mediterranean. Most of them are going there. Why? Because they're thinking that, on the other side, there is a better future, they can work, it's about dignity. So it's very important that we have that continental free trade area where any company from anywhere on the world can come, set up in Africa, anywhere in Africa. We have the raw material, we have the skill, we have the youth, they can produce in Africa, and we have the demand in Africa. And then we can ship to all African countries. So it's very important to have the continental free trade area for that. Other issues, when you talk about the continental free trade area, you will see that we have, where is the WTO today? Actually, it's a lot of issues with the WTO. Some may that the World Trade Organization is the WTO. So some may that, is still. So it's very important, and the whole world is negotiating multi-regional trade agreement. So it's very important that we actually get it together so that we don't become very, very small fish and nowhere to be seen. Countries such as US and EU are negotiating. So these are big bloc, different continents, and they're negotiating. So within ourselves, within our continent, we must have that continental free trade area. We're in a good track, and the deadline is 2017. It's achievable. We're going to surprise the world, as I said, and we're going to move forward. Of course, on the trade side, we also deal with, the outside of Africa. When you talk about negotiation with the economic partnership agreement with the EU, when you talk about, getting an African position for the World Trade Organization, when you talk about, negotiation with the US on the AGOA, which is access to the, their market and so forth. So we also deal with international trade. On the industry side, what we do is really make sure, how do we benefit? How do we make sure that the mineral resources benefit the African people? What do we need to do? Good contract negotiation, making sure that we have the data, geological survey, so that we know what we have in our soil. We make sure that, we have good exit strategy before they mine anything. We must make sure that what's after the mining. We don't want to be ending up with a hole on the ground, because they took all the mineral resources and then the population is left on the ground with the hole. So I think it's very important that before we mine, what is the infrastructure that is required? What is the correct plan for closure of these mineral resources? Because we know that mineral resources are not forever. We also need to address this issue of, commodity prices. We know that, commodities are going up and down, but recently, really the price slump. It's a problem for Africa. Most of us, actually, in our capitals, they predicted, for example, the barrel of oil about 100, and then the price went to about 30. How do you, adjust that budget? How do you adjust that shock? And it's very important that we diversify our economies. It's very important that we're not just reactive to prices. And again, transforming the raw material, the shock will be less. Because when you export raw material, then you really, because the buyers for raw material are outsider, and the producer are really inside of Africa, so that when you deal with raw material, of course, you're always going to be subjected to this big shock, and really you have to be reactive. So that's an important component that we must address. And of course, when I talk about trade facilitation, I have a custom unit, and this custom unit work more with the Director General of Custom to make sure that the trade facilitation really happen. We also went to the World Trade Organization in 2013, signed a binding agreement on trade facilitation. So it's important that we implement what we have signed. So we work with the Director General of Custom, who report to the Minister of Finance, as you know. So basically, I deal with Minister of Trade, Minister of Mineral Resources, Industry, if it's separate from trade, and also the Director General of Custom or Minister of Finance. So this is just kind of my briefing, and I will take your question. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Excellency, for that very brief and educative summary about the activities under your department. We will now open the floor to the journalists, please, to ask some few questions so that the Excellency will be able to address them. Please, you introduce yourself before asking the questions. Any questions? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Okay, one by one.
Bon, merci. Can I put my question in French, please? L'Afrique.
Présentez-vous, s'il vous plaît.
André Gakwaya, Rwanda News Agency. From Rwanda News Agency et Journal Grand Lac Hebdo. Je suis du Rwanda. Et maintenant, l'Afrique veut être intégrée, mais en même temps, être membre du Conseil permanent des Nations Unies. Et c'est quelque chose, c'est une ambition qui exige qu'économiquement, nous soyons autonomes, que nous ne puissions pas mendier, que nous soyons autosuffisants financièrement, économiquement. Et justement, le commerce africain, intra-africain, est essentiel pour cela. Mais il se pose un problème de défi. Hein. Ça signifie donc il faut qu'il y ait des infrastructures suffisantes pour pouvoir échanger entre pays africains, faire circuler notre produit à travers des chemins de fer, par exemple. C'est bon, il y a le passeport africain qui va être donné, c'est bon, mais pour pouvoir circuler, il faut ces moyens, il faut ces produits. Alors, nous pensons ici à la transformation, à l'industrialisation. L'industrialisation qui exige une certaine innovation, le recours à des technologies. Et bien sûr, en Afrique, on a commencé à mettre en place des centres d'excellence pour que nos étudiants, nous puissions avoir des travailleurs qualifiés, des personnes compétentes avec des capacités construites. Alors, est-ce que on est engagé, mais c'est encore un peu trop tôt pour penser devenir tout d'un coup de baguette magique, être autonome économiquement, financièrement. Est-ce que vous ne voyez pas encore que le chemin risque d'être long parce que nous avons des facteurs essentiels, des choses essentielles qui ne sont pas encore mises en place, madame?
Merci, André. Who is the next? Okay, please.
Thank you very much. My name is Irene Chimenya, I work with Rwanda Broadcasting Agency. My question goes to you, Commissioner of Trade and Industry. I would like to hear from you, what's your reaction, Africa being one of the richest in terms of minerals and having a poor economy? What do you think is the cause of that? Because I heard you talked about this. Thank you very much.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. That was straightforward. Yes, next.
Thank you very much. My name is Collins Moy. I write for the New Times Daily. It's a local English daily. My question is on the cost of trade in Africa. Part of the reason why we continue to see very low levels of intra-Africa trade is because of the cost of doing business across Africa. So what's African Union's what would you suggest as a way forward to bring down the cost of doing business across the continent? Thank you.
Okay, your colleague, your neighbor, and then we can take the next round if you don't mind. Thank you.
Nicholas Long, Voice of America. Your Excellency, you've talked about the goal of a African free trade area by 2017. Do you have a figure for the average level of tariffs between African countries at the moment? Has this level been falling? And how does the level of tariffs between African countries compare with other continents? And when you say free trade, what about other barriers like health and safety controls, phytosanitary controls? What other barriers is the African Union trying to reduce when it talks about a free trade area?
Thank you. We'll give the opportunity first to the Commissioner to address those few questions, then we'll take a second round. And I have seen my friend just there. We'll start the second round. Excellency, you have the floor.
Well, merci beaucoup d'abord pour la première question, Monsieur André. Je pense que vous avez un peu parcouru beaucoup de questions, mais si j'ai bien compris votre question, je pense que vous parlez qu'on a besoin de mettre les choses essentielles en place avant de vraiment être indépendant, ou bien avant d'être économiquement, je veux dire, indépendant. Et puis, vous avez bien sûr parlé de cette transformation et autres, mais j'ai compris que vous voulez dire il faut les chemins de fer, il faut les infrastructures appropriées avant de penser à être avoir un siège aux Nations Unies et autres. Si c'est bien ça la question, je pense. En fait, oui. Aujourd'hui, je pense que tout le monde sait que l'Afrique a besoin, je veux dire, des infrastructures. On a besoin des infrastructures, que ce soit soft infrastructure ou bien hard infrastructure, que ce soit les rues, que ce soit la facilitation du commerce, que ce soit les barrières des douanes et autres. Donc, on est tous d'accord que vraiment les infrastructures sont nécessaires pour l'Afrique. Tout le monde le sait, donc ce n'est pas un secret, je pense. Mais, bien sûr, on ne peut pas se dire non plus que si nos pays, la majorité des pays africains, d'ici 2025, ils ont un plan pour être un pays émergent. D'ici 2025, et aujourd'hui déjà on est en, je veux dire 2016, fin 2016, c'est dans quelques années. Donc en fait, et donc s'ils ont un plan pour être un pays émergent, on ne peut pas ne pas parler de transformation des matières premières. On ne peut pas ne pas parler, bien sûr, d'améliorer nos infrastructures. Et on ne peut pas parler, bien sûr, de plans émergents sans sécurité, sans démocratie et sans, je veux dire, création d'emplois. Donc, moi, je pense que nos pays, nos dirigeants ont tous les atouts qu'il faut faire. Je veux dire, ils ont le plan émergent. Mais ce qui est important, il faut vraiment qu'on réconcilie, si vous voulez, le plan émergent, ce plan émergent à ce plan d'industrialisation. Parce qu'on ne peut pas parler vraiment d'émergence sans production, sans industrialisation. Et puis, il faut aussi reconnaître qu'aucun pays du monde ne s'est industrialisé parce que les autres sont venus vous donner quelque chose. Je pense que c'est un truc qui, l'industrialisation, c'est vraiment un agenda qui demande de gros investissements et à long terme. Mais je pense aujourd'hui, il faut dire qu'il y a beaucoup d'efforts qui sont faits pour vraiment industrialiser, pour s'assurer qu'on signe de bons contrats pour les mines, pour s'assurer que vraiment quand les gens viennent, qu'il y a des transferts de technologies et donc on va aussi petit à petit transformer. Aujourd'hui, on ne peut pas vous dire que l'Afrique compte transformer à 100% ses matières premières, mais il faut commencer quelque part. Un certain pourcentage. Est-ce que c'est 25% qui est acceptable? Et bien sûr, il faut la zone de libre-échange pour dire que le pays A peut transformer jusqu'à un certain niveau, pays B va aller de l'autre niveau. Et donc, après, quand ça sort de l'Afrique, il y a un certain pourcentage de transformation en Afrique et je pense que c'est très important. Donc, j'espère que j'ai répondu à la question. Je pense que oui, les moyens, les choses essentielles comme l'infrastructure est très, très essentielle, mais on ne peut pas se permettre de dire on va attendre pour avoir toutes les infrastructures nécessaires avant de penser à transformation, avant de penser à autre chose. Le plan émergent inclut tout ça. Il inclut les infrastructures, il inclut la transformation, il inclut la sécurité alimentaire et autres. Et je pense qu'on est en train de travailler très fort pour y arriver. Now, the second question is about the paradox. And I think this is a very valid, a good question. You know, paradox about Africa being endowed with natural resources. really rich in mineral resources, but yet poor. It's true. And again, why? Because again, in the past, we have been really, transacting in raw materials. We just take the raw material from the ground. You were living in from the ground, and yes, it will increase the revenue because that's why you see that Africa is growing. It's not a pure hazard when you see that actually 6 out of the 10 fastest economies are in Africa because we have the raw materials. We take out the raw materials, so there is growth. But does this growth transform into structural transformation of this economy? That this growth really created employment in this economy? That this growth is really inclusive? And the response is no. Now why? Because again, we're trading raw material. There is no value addition. When you talk about value addition, you talk about skill of people, you talk about transforming in this continent, you talk about, acquire certain things, procuring certain things from this continent. And I think that when you do that, the life of the people will change because even if you employ 10 people, you change the life of 10 people. So I think that is very important. And therefore, in order for us to properly address this paradox, we have to be very, very conscientious about the type of contract we're negotiating. What type of contract? Are they good? Do they have local content? Do we need to import every single thing from outside to do anything? Do we need just to ship everything out of the continent and then really there is no value addition? And I think Africa knows that we cannot continue to do that type of business. We really must look at relationship, at partnership that really intend to add value to our raw materials, that we need to create jobs in this continent. Now, most of our government today, they're really improving, their environment to make sure that they attract business people. Because when you attract people in this continent, they will produce in this continent. And it's very, very important because that's what it creates jobs. So this type of creation of jobs, diversification of our economies and so forth is very, very crucial in order for us to ensure that this paradox is properly addressed. We also need to make sure we negotiate good contract to also make sure that to finance our infrastructure that is needed. Nobody from the world, nobody can give us money to industrialize and to fix roads because it's never done anywhere. So I don't think that all of us know that there is no cooperation today that will bring us infrastructure and that we have to do it. We have to find a way of doing it. So that is my response to you. Now, the cost of doing business, how do we improve it? And what do we have to, what we're doing to bring the cost down? The cost of business is very important. One of the aspects to bring the cost down is trade facilitation. And when you talk about trade facilitation, you're talking about simple things. Maybe, have customized better, like your custom, border to make sure that, a truck doesn't come and stay there for 3 days. That costs money, and of course that cost will translate into the goods. It's important that we really look at all the measure of trade facilitation, the one that we can address through ICT, through ICT overall, maybe communicate from country A to country B to say that really there is a truck coming, there is this. Of course, they can do their due diligence on security, but it's very important that we really look at all of this aspect right before. The issue of transforming in Africa also can be, a factor of bringing costs down. Because today, most of the things, we take raw material, ship them, maybe we receive semi-final good, maybe we receive final good. So when we talk about receiving final good, actually we can't even talk about, cost of doing business being high. But if we receive a good, that means that there is also transportation cost. So it's very important that we really fix all of these issues. The know-how is important because, of course, there is also always a learning curve in everything that we do. And we also need to make sure that we also protect our infant industry. Because, yes, we have to deal with the issue about, cost of doing business, but we also need to make sure that we protect the infant industry so that they can grow into bigger businesses. Because if we leave everything to be open, then, other businesses, they can't compete with them and they will die. So I think that it's also important to look at this issue about protection of infant industry, creation of employment, and also the cost of doing business. And I think that it's important to bring our costs down. The infrastructure is important. Energy. Nobody can talk to you about production today without energy. So it's a big factor, and it's a big factor to most of our African countries. And I think that, you know, Africa knows, the whole world knows, and I think that our government are doing much to really make sure that this issue of energy is addressed, because we must address it. Whether being in solar, you know, energy, we must address this issue. Now, my colleague from infrastructure, I'm sure that when she comes, she can talk to you more about energy, but it's important that we really talk about energy in order for us also to bring the cost down. Now, the goal of CFTA, that is a question. Now, I did say on my introduction that yes, CFTA is possible. Continental Free Trade Area is possible by 2017. Now, let me talk about, first of all, the level of ambition of this CFTA. The level of ambition is trade in goods, trade in services, competition policy, investment policy, competition policy. Now, I will not be right if I tell you today that, you know, we are looking at one phase, Continental Free Trade Area, to address all of these themes at the same time. Now what we're looking for a framework agreement on goods and also on services. Now we will be having a second phase to talk about investment policy, about competition policy, and, you know, all the remaining issues, intellectual property right. However, when you look at the investment policy, it's very difficult not to really touch the investment without, you know, talking, you know, when you talk about services, when you're talking about goods, you must touch the investment policy. So there is certain component that will be addressed. Now, you spoke about, I think, you know, are we, you know, talking about health and safety and all this? Yes, we are, because it's important we address the standard in our products, because if you don't address them, how do you actually accept one product even from one country to another? So it's very important. So that scope on trade in goods and trade in services include tariff liberalization. We must liberalize our tariff, and we must be ambitious, because it's important that we give each other at least what we gave to others. Because if not, if today we say that, oh, we're going to liberalize, you know, 60% of our tariff, then I think there is no point for CFTA, when we know that we're in average, you know, liberalizing more than 70%, you know, seeing 80% to others. So it's very important that to be ambitious enough. The rule of origin is very important. You know, we talk about production, we talk about exporting out of Africa. We must address this issue of rule of origin. Of course, dispute resolution is very important. There is no continental free trade area whereby we talk about 54 countries, and then we don't have a, you know, like a mechanism for, you know, to solve dispute. Trade facilitation, I think I talked about it lengthily, is part also of the trade facilitation. Custom procedure and simplification of custom document is very important. Transit procedures, non-tariff barriers are important. You know, we really we need to make sure that we address the issue of non-tariff barriers. And non-tariff barriers really sometimes are difficult to explain, but it's very, very important that, you know, we have a mechanism to report to them, to make sure that they're properly addressed, because that's also is really one factor of, you know, cost of doing business is very high. Trade remedies, all these technical barrier to trades, and then sanitary and non-sanitary measures, and also the trade promotion. So these are the things that really we're trying to address, and we're hoping that, you know, on the tariff, we make sure that at least we give each other at least what we're giving to others. So it's very, very important. We cannot, you know, have a continental free trade area that is empty. And also, I did say, I think at the beginning of my intervention, we must produce in order for us to trade. So we must look at this issue of industrialization very seriously, because if we don't produce, then we will be establishing big market. We will import from all over the world, and then we will trade the product that we imported. So it's important that we produce. So we have also this creation of jobs in this continent, and we talk really about prosperity of this continent. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Excellency. We'll take the last and second rounds of questions. I'll start by my friend here, next by you, and we'll go in that order. Thank you.
Voilà.
To yourself, please.
Merci, je m'appelle Badi Banga, journaliste de Mama Radio en République démocratique du Congo. Madame, j'ai 3 petites questions précises en tout cas. La première, j'aimerais savoir, vous parlez de One Africa, One Market. Est-ce que c'est opportun d'avoir un seul marché pour tout un continent? Selon vous, est-ce que cela est de nature à réduire le volume d'importation de l'Afrique face au reste du monde? La deuxième question est celle de savoir, l'Afrique dispose évidemment de beaucoup de ressources, mais malheureusement, sa jeunesse, pourtant une importante main-d'œuvre, est au chômage dans la plupart des cas. C'est un paradoxe, vous l'avez si bien dit. Mais comment l'Union africaine pourrait-elle aider à relever ces défis? Est-ce que sur cette base-là, vous ne craignez pas la fuite des cerveaux? La fuite des cerveaux. Dernière question. En vérité, madame, est-ce que les industries africaines profitent réellement aux communautés locales? Les droits de l'homme, parce qu'il en est question dans ce sommet de l'Union africaine, les droits de l'homme sont-ils bien évidemment pris en compte dans la signature des contrats d'exploitation et bien d'autres? Je vous remercie.
Thank you very much. Merci beaucoup. Oui, s'il vous plaît.
My name is Ahmed from BBC World Service, and I have 2 questions. You have spoken about free trade while we don't create opportunities in Africa. So African Union, as commissioners, only we see you in summits, meetings, but we never see you that you are visiting Somalia, you are visiting South Sudan, you are visiting Libya and creating jobs and encouraging people to create jobs. So are you, or your work is only attending meetings, or your work is to create opportunities and to encourage people? The second question is, we know elite people, those who have money, dominated in every place. And we talk about corruption and just discriminating people. So in that case also, what about the corruption when it comes free trade and also industrialization? Thank you.
Thank you very much. Please pass on the microphone this way.
Thank you very much, Madam Commissioner. Rodrigue Arguirahira is my name. I work with a local newspaper here called The New Times. Honorable, part of the substantial agenda in this summit is to look at, or to launch the E-African passport. And I would have loved you to give us a number of insights on the genesis and philosophy behind that whole Africa e-passport, the practicability of it, and as you respond to that, you can as well shed more light on how important is it in your endeavor as a commissioner in charge of trade at Africa. And maybe to qualify it a bit, I just wanted also to ask, how has it come or reached to this particular point? Why did we have to wait until today so that we launch it? What have we missed in the process, and what are we expecting? Thank you very much. Maybe the last one, which is attached to that, if you're talking of free movement and free trade, you also talk of uniformity in issuance of work permits. Have you thought of that? What have you resolved? Thank you.
Okay, should I understand this is the last question? Someone? Okay, yes, Francois.
Hello, my name is Francois Ndengwe of Homme d'Afrique and Femme d'Afrique magazine. Your Excellency, we know the difficult task that was yours in the building of the continental African trade. And we know that we need this continental trade, given the world type organization in terms of commerce. If we want to exist, we need it, and this is very important for us. I have just two short questions, Your Excellency. The first one is, in 2012, our head of sales decided that 2017 will be the date. How optimistic are you so that we can deliver it at that time? And you are also in charge of industry. And we need that in modern times. Economic development means industrial development. And to have industrial development, we need industrialists. How are we preparing? How are we educating? How are we giving the education needed to have specific African industrialists? Because we can have doctors, we can have engineers, but we need to be to build industries, you need specific skills. So how are we organizing so that we can raise and we have that, we could have an education on the long term of these people who will be our captain of industries in the future? Thank you.
Wow, very pertinent questions out there. Excellency, you have a serious task now to answer all the questions. Over to you.
I don't have to press anything. No, it's on. Okay, thank you. Thank you very much. I think all of them are good questions. Let me try to respond to every single one of them. One is one Africa and one market. Are we trying to... Is that in France, I think he said? Hein? C'était en français. Hein? Désolé, je vais répondre en français. Vous avez parlé d'une Afrique et puis d'un marché. Est-ce qu'on est en train de réduire les importations? Oui, l'objectif ultime, c'est vraiment de réduire les importations. L'Afrique ne peut pas continuer à importer tous les produits qu'on consomme. Aujourd'hui, je vous donne un exemple. Dans certains pays, je veux dire, vous prenez le pays, mon pays, le Tchad. Au sud, je pense à mois de mai, juin, il y a tellement de mangues que personne n'achète les mangues. Vous passez dans la rue, vous pouvez ramasser les mangues. C'est des très bonnes mangues, des mangues très juteuses et autres. Mais malheureusement, parce qu'on ne produit pas, parce qu'on ne transforme pas ces mangues, on importe du jus. Donc, c'est des choses qu'il faut vraiment qu'on adresse. Mais quand maintenant, donc c'est de ça que je veux parler, vraiment réduire les importations. Mais je ne dis pas que l'Afrique aujourd'hui peut se permettre, d'ailleurs, aucun pays, même les pays industrialisés, ils importent quand même. Je ne dis pas qu'on va éliminer les exportations, mais il faut quand même qu'on réduise les importations. Je pense que tout le monde le sait, ce n'est pas un secret. On a les terres arables ici. Je veux dire, on a toutes les terres, on a des terres qui sont bonnes, on peut cultiver, et je pense qu'il n'y a pas normalement de raison qu'on ne peut pas se nourrir. Il n'y a pas de raison d'avoir de sécurité alimentaire, un problème de sécurité alimentaire. Et donc, vraiment, il faut qu'on transforme, il faut qu'on produise. Et puis, vraiment, ça va nous aider entre nous-mêmes. S'il y a un déficit d'un pays A, il y aura, je veux dire, de surproduction dans l'autre pays. Et puis, donc, on peut se le partager. Maintenant, quand je parle d'une seule Afrique et d'un seul marché, je ne parle pas de théoriquement un seul marché. Je parle de... l'entreprise peut être n'importe où. Produire, et elle peut, je veux dire, envoyer vers le marché à Kinshasa, elle peut envoyer vers le marché au Tchad, en Djamena et partout ailleurs. Donc, en fait, on n'est pas obligé d'être vraiment, je veux dire, au Congo pour servir le Congo, parce que maintenant, il y a des problèmes de douane qui sont très, très, très sérieux pour exporter vers un autre pays de l'Afrique de l'Ouest ou bien. Donc, c'est vraiment cette affaire de comment réduire ces barrières tarifaires, comment nous assurer que les produits d'un pays A, du Kenya, rentrent sans problème en Ouganda et autres. C'est de ce genre de trucs qu'on parle d'un marché d'une Afrique. Donc, c'est vraiment ce genre de trucs. Mais bien sûr, je pense que c'est très important. Il faut qu'on mette l'emphase. Il faut qu'on encourage la production, par exemple, de l'agriculture. On encourage la production, mais il faut aussi qu'on encourage, la transformation. Donc, nos banques, ils doivent avoir un rôle dans ce développement de l'Afrique. Et aujourd'hui, je pense que c'est une discussion qu'on doit sérieusement avoir avec les banques, parce que dans tous les pays du monde, les banques ont un rôle crucial dans le développement d'un pays. Donc, c'est important de parler de ça. Les taux d'intérêt sont très, 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 exorbitants. Et donc, vraiment, honnêtement, ça ne favorise pas l'entrepreneuriat, ça ne favorise pas le milieu des affaires. Je pense qu'on a besoin de travailler dans cet aspect. Parce que auparavant, c'est vraiment le gouvernement qui s'attelait à tout donner. La fonction publique ne peut pas absorber tout le monde. Donc, c'est important aussi dans la formation d'avoir une formation d'entrepreneuriat où vraiment on est formé pour essayer d'aider les autres, s'aider soi-même et puis aussi aider les autres, embaucher 1, 2, 3 personnes. Je pense que ça fait quand même du sens. Les banques, le rôle des banques, c'est important. Le rôle du secteur privé est important, donc dans la création de l'emploi. Donc vraiment, il faut trouver un processus pour travailler ensemble, pour vraiment sortir de ce genre de paradoxe et pour avancer. C'est pour ça que je pense que le monde entier est en train de parler de PPP, Public-Private Partnership. C'est important d'impliquer tous les acteurs de cette société, mais bien sûr les universitaires et autres, pour s'assurer comment on va avancer. Et je pense que ça, c'est très important. L'Union africaine veut faire son premier forum. Et malheureusement, on n'a pas pu le tenir cette année et ça va être en mars 2017. Ça va être, comment on appelle, en île Maurice. Ça va se tenir en île Maurice. Et ce forum a l'objectif d'amener les chefs d'État, les chefs des entreprises, les jeunes entrepreneurs, les banques et autres pour discuter de dire qu'est-ce qu'il faut faire. Parce que si on a besoin d'une croissance, par exemple, de 10% pour qu'on puisse voir vraiment les résultats concrets dans la vie de nos populations, peut-être que maintenant on a un taux de croissance de 6 à 7%, ce n'est pas suffisant. Qu'est-ce qu'il faut faire pour arriver à ce taux de croissance de 7%? Quel est le rôle du gouvernement? Quel est le rôle du secteur privé? Quel est le rôle des banques, des universitaires et autres pour essayer de voir comment on peut avancer? Et je pense qu'une fois que toutes les parties prenantes s'assoient pour essayer de discuter et sérieusement ce sujet, je pense qu'on va aller de l'avance. La deuxième question. Les jeunes sont en chômage. Comment relever le défi? Bien sûr, fuite de cerveau, c'est une question importante. Maintenant, aujourd'hui, quand vous voyez, j'ai parlé, je pense, de la migration. Et je peux appeler plus ou moins une migration forcée. Parce que ces jeunes sont désespérés. Ils sont en train de partir vers les Méditerranée, prendre extrêmement de risques. Peut-être mourir, et peut-être que si je traverse de l'autre côté, je peux avoir une meilleure vie. Et même s'ils traversent de l'autre côté, au début, ils vont bien sûr galérer. C'est pas, c'est pas donné. Donc, en fait, qu'est-ce qu'il faut faire? Il faut transformer encore. Parce qu'on ne peut pas parler de création d'emplois sans transformation. Parce qu'une fois que vous envoyez les matières premières, vous ne pouvez rien transformer. Vous ne pouvez jamais adresser le problème de migration. Donc, on ne va pas parler de migration parce que maintenant les conséquences, parce qu'il y a le problème social, les gens sont partis mourir et autres. Ça, c'est les conséquences du chômage. Ça, c'est les conséquences. Donc, il faut vraiment proprement adresser toutes les causes. Pourquoi? Qu'est-ce qui amène nos jeunes à aller vraiment mourir de l'autre côté? Donc, c'est vraiment ce problème-là qu'il faut voir. Et la majorité, je dis bien la majorité, c'est vraiment, c'est question d'emploi. D'autres, bien sûr, il y a la gouvernance, peut-être, je ne sais pas, c'est des réfugiés et autres qui n'ont pas de bonnes conditions de vie, mais pour la majorité, c'est vraiment l'affaire d'emploi. Et il faut vraiment qu'on trouve un moyen pour adresser ce problème de nos jeunes. Que ce soit en formation, il faut les intéresser, il faut les impliquer, cette jeunesse, et il faut vraiment être créatif pour qu'on puisse trouver comment occuper cette jeunesse. Et je pense qu'une fois qu'on occupe cette jeunesse, elle ne va pas être un avantage juste pour l'Afrique, mais elle va être un avantage pour le monde entier. Parce qu'aujourd'hui, quand vous voyez un pays comme la Chine, quand vous voyez le Japon, toute leur population, la population active est en train de partir. Donc la population vieillit. Et cette population africaine peut être vraiment un plus pour nous et pour le monde entier. Mais si on n'arrive pas à adresser leurs problèmes, cette population va être un problème pour nous et pour le monde entier aussi. Parce qu'aujourd'hui, la migration, cette migration qui est forcée, elle n'est pas un problème seulement d'Afrique. Même l'Europe, maintenant, ils ont des problèmes parce que maintenant, les gens s'en vont de l'autre côté. Et donc, ça devient un problème beaucoup plus grand et un problème mondial. Même le terrorisme, si nos jeunes sont occupés, ils ne vont pas aller s'attarder pour être, des terroristes ils sont facilement influençables parce qu'ils n'ont rien à faire et ils sont désespérés. Parfois, ils sont des génies, mais malheureusement, ils n'ont pas les occupations nécessaires. Donc, je pense que vraiment, c'est un paradoxe qu'on a besoin de chercher à adresser à tout prix. Et donc, je pense que tous les chefs d'État, l'Union africaine, c'est en tout cas les pays membres, ils sont en train de voir comment adresser ce problème. C'est un problème crucial et très important pour l'avenir de ce continent et même du monde pour moi. Maintenant, est-ce que les entreprises profitent des locaux? Je pense que quand on parle des matières premières, quand on parle des exportations des matières premières, quand on parle de contrats qui sont mal négociés, non. Mais aujourd'hui, on a besoin de contrats qui soient bien négociés. C'est pour ça que je vous ai dit, par exemple, dans les histoires, les choses des mines, on ne veut pas qu'un exploitant vienne, enlever tous les minéraux qu'on a et nous laisser avec un trou à la fin de la journée. On a besoin de s'assurer qu'avant qu'il ne vienne, qu'est-ce qu'il faut? Est-ce qu'il faut une école dans cette communauté? Est-ce qu'il faut un hôpital dans cette communauté? Est-ce qu'il faut une route dans cette communauté? Qu'est-ce qu'il faut faire? Il faut un préalable, un minimum dans cette communauté avant de commencer l'exploitation. Une fois que l'exploitation est commencée, quel est le pourcentage de locaux qui doivent travailler dans ces mines? C'est important. Et à quel niveau? Si on n'a pas le niveau nécessaire, est-ce qu'ils vont nous transmettre certaines technologies, certaines connaissances pour nos jeunes? Parce que demain, il faut qu'ils apprennent, bien sûr. Donc, il ne faut pas aussi qu'on puisse juste ramasser des choses pour que demain, on ne pourra jamais comprendre comment opérer certaines situations. Donc, il faut aussi savoir dans quel domaine les Africains sont impliqués. C'est important. Et une fois qu'on a su ça, maintenant, après la fermeture, il faut qu'on pense à un plan de fermeture. Une fois que c'est fermé, qu'est-ce qu'ils vont faire? L'agro-business, parce qu'on ne peut pas aussi se permettre que toute cette population d'un village ou d'une ville vraiment transite juste parce que maintenant les mines sont finies dans cette localité et maintenant il n'y a plus d'emploi. Maintenant, ils vont tous migrer vers les capitales. Comment on va faire? Donc, il faut vraiment trouver une solution pour adresser la fermeture. Parce qu'on sait, tout le monde sait, que ce n'est pas éternel les mines. Donc, vraiment, c'est une durée qui est courte. Mais après cette durée, comment cette population va survivre? Et c'est ça qu'on est en train d'encourager pour nous assurer que dans tous les contrats, on doit mettre ce qu'il faut. Vraiment pour penser à la population et pour penser après, l'enlèvement des mines, qu'est-ce qu'on va faire avec nos ressources, comment on va investir dans nos ressources. Et c'est pour ça qu'on a la vision africaine minière, la vision minière africaine qui vraiment a cet objectif d'adresser ces problèmes. J'espère que j'ai répondu à vos questions, Mama Radio. Let me turn to Mr. Ahmed. Mr. Ahmed, you have an interesting question. And I think I will respond. And I think it's an interesting because a lot of people see the African Union as being going to meetings. They see African Union as being with government. Of course, we go to a lot of meetings. Of course, we go to, with outsider within Africa. Of course, we talk to government. But we have to understand that the African Union is a continental body. We cannot go to Somalia every day. We cannot go to Libya every day. We cannot go to Sudan every day to address exactly, specifically, how you're going to have a job, in these countries. It's interesting because all of the three countries that you name have some type of, insecurity on them. So, of course, you will see, and I'm sure you have seen the African Union on all of these three countries, but mostly dealing with the issue of security. You have AMISOM in Somalia. We have troops in Libya, and we're still doing mediation about what is happening in Libya. And even this summit will be talking about South Sudan. The African Union is very active in mediation with South Sudan and we are very, very active. So that's why we have a peace and security department. And as you can see, and it's normal, in order for you to talk about development, in order for you to talk about creation of employment, it's very important to have peace. Sometimes, peace dictates development, and development also is important for peace. So, of course, we're not forgetting completely these countries, but the priorities on certain aspects is, when people are dying, when there is, human life being lost and all these things, we must address that. When a house is in fire, the firefighter needs to make sure that, there is no more fire in order for us to think about other things. But on the other side, as a continent, we make sure we talk about policies no raw materials. We don't want that type of business. We want good policies. We want creation of employment. We want to talk to other partners to bring funds, to have better policies so that it can give us the policy space to transform in this continent. We want to talk about, our youth, their health, their security, their education, and also their employment. So that's what we do. But implementation happen at different levels. We have regional economic communities, and also we have the government. The African Union can never do the work of the government, because if we are going to do the work of the government, I think you need more than 8 commissioners. We're only 8 commissioners. We have 1 deputy chairperson, and we have the chairperson, so it's 10 of us. We can never do everything in a country. We go to meetings if we're invited to encourage, society, to encourage that type of, creation of employment and all good things that are for African people. But really, implementation must happen at the country level. And all of these countries of Africa are members of the African Union. When they come here, they talk about policies. They talk about good policy for all of the African countries. And then they need to implement it at national level. At regional level, we also have implementation, and we also have responsibility for continental implementation, such as, cross-cutting, infrastructure project, peaceful continent, all of these things. We need to really make sure that we deal with them. So I hope that, you understood a little bit what is the role of the African Union, but be assured of one thing. Even though we go to all of these good places, Europe, America, and the remaining of Africa, we're always thinking about Africa first and discussing Africa's agenda for the African people. So it's really discussing and defending you on all aspects of life, and then we hope that it will bring good result for the African people, and we're here for all of you, to work for you, for the African people, really to make sure that we have better life for the African, and especially for the youth and women. It's very, very important because our future depends on that. So this is the one question, and I hope that I responded. Now, the other question, you talked about corruption. Yes, I think there is corruption. And corruption, yes, affects trade, affects industry, affects so many things of our lives. But I wanted to remind you, I think that as African, we should always know that when there is corruption, there is always the person that is get corrupted, and there is always the corruptee that is corrupting us. Sometimes it's among us Africans, sometimes it's with outsiders too. So I think we need to address that issue and address it properly. So corruption exists, it's a fact, we need to address it. The big corruption happen, not the corruption maybe the big corruption happen when, tax haven, they take resources that we don't know about it, all of these things. This type of corruption, we must tackle them and must tackle them correctly. The issue of transfer pricing is very, very important. We must address it. The illicit flow is very important, and actually is more than what you call it at corruption, because I think the percentage of corruption is very low compared to every money that is leaving the continent. We don't even account for it, and there is no tax pay on our countries. So yes, there is corruption. We need to tackle it, but the issue of illicit flow out of this continent is very important that it can be tackled. It's more than any aid that we receive in Africa combined. The numbers are outrageous. And Africa must address that, but it needs the help of the international communities. We must make sure that, this money that is leaving our continent without taxes and all these things, the whole international communities is helping us to get that money back in this continent. It belongs to us. So much money is flying out of this continent, and it must be there because it's needed for the development. It's needed for you guys people, for our people, in order for them to develop and, get all the infrastructure that we need and transform in this continent. So this is my take on that. Now, the launch of the e-passport. You ask about how practical it is, how important it is for trade, how now that we're doing it, what have we missed? And I think you ask about uniformity of work permit. Now, I think it's very important, movement of people. When you talk about, free trade area, we have to understand one thing. Goods do not move themselves. So it's people that move the goods. So we have to talk about movement of people. Today, it's more easy for any foreigner to come to Africa than an African to move in this continent. It's a problem. Even for a big investor, somebody that has money, that want to come to our countries to invest, you know, they require so much visa, individual visa. They will require maybe one for this country, country A, country B. It takes so long, not just the fee, but actually even the length of time. And the people that have money don't have the time to really wait for visa, to wait for to be questions and all of these things. So maybe that's also one of the factors why intra-African trade is also low. So it's very important that we talk about movement of people. Now, the beauty, actually, we really want to address the movement of all people. I mean, we're not just talking about head of state, minister of foreign affairs. We're talking about all African people in the African. Now, of course, you know, countries such as Rwanda, I think Mali, even Ghana, you know, I think about 10 countries. Today they have, you know, you come to any airport, you know, you're African, they will do their due diligence, of course, to make sure that you're not a criminal, and then you have a visa at arrival, which is good, and we encourage that. Actually, our aim is really to make sure that this is continue, and more countries will do that. I think that this is something that replaces the passport, replace everything. That is the best scenario. But of course, Africa is a continent of 54 countries. Not everybody can be ready at the same time. So it will take time for certain. The 10, I mean, this country, Rwanda, is an example today. And actually, if you talk to the Rwandese authorities, they tell you maybe with the people that come, maybe less than 1% actually have issues of criminalities or whatever. But, you know, really their experience have been very positive. So, you know, for us, we encourage experience sharing, such as, you know, the case of Rwanda, so that other will come and more to come. Now, the African passport, we have in AU a passport today. This passport is not recognized by all the African member states. Few of them don't recognize it. So when we give it to the head of state, and head of state will move with that passport, of course, all of them will recognize it. That's the first one, is popularization. Then the Minister of Foreign Affairs, and of course the ambassador group and all this. But we have decided that we should give that passport also to the countries so that they can also issue to other people so that, you know, the country, the passport can be more popularized. For example, they can decide to give it to the whole government. They can decide to give it to, you know, good, you know, business people that they think that, you know, can, you know, invest all across the continent and so forth. So actually, we're going a step forward to make sure that, you know, this passport is issued, and then it can help the people of Africa to move. But the ultimate goal, as I said, is really to make sure that basically, you know, everybody move freely. Now, how did we miss it? I think we missed a lot of things, as always, but the good thing is a decision from Agenda 2063 that was, you know, adopted in 2013, and under the leadership of Dr. Dlamini Zuma, who is the chairperson of the African Union, here your passport is being launched. So I think, in my view, I think it's bravo to that one, because, you know, it's a recent project, and it has been launched, and it's going to be a reality. So I think this is a good thing. Now, uniformity of work permit, we talk about, when we talk about the CFTA, we talked about standard, all these things. We need to also make sure that we understand the equivalence of our, you know, degrees, diplomas, all of these things, so that when we can move, it's acceptable from one to another, accreditation of our universities, and so forth. So I think it's very important that we look at this issue, because when you talk about movement of people, you're also talking about movement of talent. And in order for us to recognize talent, we need to make sure that actually, you know, we have uniformity of our work permit, our, you know, credential, and all of these things. I saw my colleague, I think he's here. So let me go to the last question. And Continental Free Trade Area, the decision happened in 2012, yes. And I'm very proud to tell you that actually the decision happened in 2012, as you know. In June of 2015, just 3 years down the line, we launched, the head of state and government launched the negotiation of the Continental Free Trade Area. Negotiations have commenced. the rule of procedure have been approved. Everything is approved by, anything as rule of procedures, what consensus mean, how do we negotiate, all the countries nominated their negotiators. We already have funding to create this Continental Free Trade Area unit. So a lot of groundwork have been done. Now we have prepared modalities in trade and services, and these modalities will tell us the law of ambition, so it will be sent to the member state to look at them. When they come, we can start negotiating. And then, of course, the ultimate goal by 2017 is to have a framework agreement in trade, in goods and also in services. And as I said, phase number 2 will include the intellectual property right, the competition policy, and so forth. So I think that I am happy to tell you that it's going well. Of course, it's not going to be easy. Of course, we need political guidance from our head of state. We always need to make sure we adopt our strategies to make sure that, we're moving forward, but I think that is doable. Now, the industrialists that you have said, we need to have a specific education for industrialists and all this. I agree with you. We need industrialists. That's why we have the African Capacity Foundation, ACBF, that is actually mapping the type of skill that is required to transform this continent, the type of skill that is required to implement Agenda 2063. Do we need doctors in this continent? Do we need industrialists in this continent? Do we need lawyers in this continent? What are we lacking? So when we identify the gap, we make sure that if we negotiate with partners, for example, if Korea is coming to us and say, we want to give you 100 scholarship for a doctor, we said, no, we don't want doctor. Maybe we want industrialists. When you go to the countries, talk to them about industrialists, if this is what we want. We also want to make sure that our Pan-African universities and all of our institutions, whether being national, regional, or continental, make sure that on their program is really tailoring what we need so that we have it. And the emphasis in STEM, science, technology, mathematics, is very important. My boss, Dr. Lamine Zuma, always said, if you train mathematician, if you train engineer, they will figure out what to do with this continent. So it's very important that we also put the emphasis on this type of studies, on these STEMs, and of course, we cannot forget the education of girls. It's very important. It has a multiplying effect. We need to give equal chance to our girl. They can do it. They're very smart. And then, all our society will be a better society, and we will achieve our Agenda 2063. We will achieve our goal of a one Africa, a best Africa, a prosperous Africa. I thank you.
Thank you very much, Excellency Commissioner for Trade and Industry, for that very educative press briefing. This brings us to the end of this particular press conference, but we will be expecting the Commissioner for Economic Affairs shortly after this. And we just want to thank you for creating time out of your very busy schedule to come and address the media.
Thank you very much. And thank you, and please spread the word. Agenda 2063 is a reality. The flagship is the reality. You have the passport, you will have a continental free trade area, you have everything. So it's not a dream. It's something concrete. My colleague will talk to you about it. Please talk to the population, and actually the African Union is working for the African population. You may not see us every day. We go to the meetings, but we talk about you, African people. So I think that that's very important. Thank you very much.
Thank you.